Studio, we have political analyst Evans Wafula, and we're analyzing the looming cabinet shakeup after the inauguration of President Uhuru Kenyatta. Many thanks for staying with us, Evans. It is something that we've touched on slightly, but in a bit more detail. What or how would you rate the performance of the first cabinet or the Uhuru's previous cabinet?
I think it's really faced a lot of challenges. Mm-hmm. Initially, the intention was to get people outside politics and bring in some bit of expertise and some sort of technocrats to be able to run these ministries, divorcing them completely from politics. I think down the line they realized that the political heat was really intense, that they needed people who are politicians to be able to defend and also explain government policies from a political standpoint. And then we saw the incoming of Kiunjuri, and he has really been so much politically kind of a firebrand, trying to save the face for the government. I think that's one thing they have realized. Looking at what they're doing now, trying to bring in political rejects. That's the situation. I mean, there's no way we can explain that Ababu Namwamba, Hassan Omar, and the people who are touted to be coming into the cabinet, they're not actually bringing any policy formulation or let's say expertise, but they are just political orphans who must be rewarded, and then coming in for political expedience. Then it also goes back to the question: are they going to be effective? Are they going, other than just being given positions and jobs? And that's why I think the first cabinet was very much informed on the government agenda to be able to ensure that it delivers services to the people. Then now this second one, politics is checking in. And I want to tell you honestly is that this is not Uhuru's cabinet. This is Deputy President's launching pad. Because what will happen is that he's really bringing in people who will probably and if you're not on Ruto's good books, forget about these positions in this cabinet, because I think everything now has to do with 2022. So he's trying to make sure that he brings people who will not only sit pretty with good and plummy jobs, but also politically trying to just make that will for the deputy president.
It was a sensitive topic during the campaign season because initially, constitutionally, cabinet secretaries should not really be engaged in politics, so to speak, and that was a reason as to the that informed the formation of the first cabinet. Very few politicians there we saw. How, I mean, is that likely to affect things with this now? Things going back to how they were previously, having cabinet secretaries who are very much politically inclined, who are very much politicians in the scene.
I think, yeah, it will really impact or even inform how the government then will have to operate or conduct itself in the next 5 years or so. But looking at I think the fact that a member of cabinet should not be a politician was informed by the fact that this is somebody not only serving the good of his party or the good of political class, but for the good of the nation. So I think if we lose that, and that's what we are going to lose, that you'll find mostly is that like during Moi's time and even to the extent Kibaki's time, where cabinet secretaries try to concentrate developmental resources in specific regions, because these are regions that are aligned to them politically, and also these are regions where they feel that it is our government, and then we have to make sure that we deliver as a government. And you will see what happened even in the previous election is that the transformation agenda that the government had very much concentrated on one regions, on areas where the cabinet ministers are able to, were drawn from those areas. Looking even before the swearing of the president, you've seen what the water minister has been doing, trying to ensure that in his region, and I think it is very conflicted, that in this region he has to make sure that water, dams, and everything are brought there. So I think when we're going to see politicians coming in, then it is also going to be to sort of affect the developmental agenda. Because when we talk about cabinet position, more or less we are talking about how to bring resources to the people, how to be able to articulate government development policies and other policies that affect directly the running of the government. Right. So I think the president knows very well that when these cabinet positions are being, and you see, it's already people are talking to relatives of the president and the deputy, and it's like about it's not, there's no merit on that. It's political expedience. How close are you to, people are now cutting deals. And what will happen is that we're going to see a cabinet that is also going to be shaken or threatened by the political environment.
Mm-hmm. And that's the next question, because where does that leave the face of national representation, considering the very big rift between Jubilee and NASA, which is basically the biggest opposition party? Where does that leave national representation within the cabinet?
Michelle, that really entrenches exclusion. Because what then happens is that we can't say that every community must have a slot in the cabinet.
Right.
But then we can't also say that people who supported the president and the ruling party must be preferred to be in those positions. I think what we need to do is that Kenyans should be allowed to compete equally for positions that they feel they can take. Of course, there's some element of political allegiance, which also plays in. But I think the initial cabinet, which was informed by having people who are professionals coming in, like the CS for industrialization, coming from a bank, like Amina coming from the UN, and look at their performance. I mean, their performance has been very exemplary, as opposed to politicians who, at some point, forget whether they're supposed to run government ministries or do politics. So that has been a conflict, but I think it really entrenches exclusion. And what will happen in the last, and it threatens also the legacy of President Uhuru. So he has also to be very careful when he's doing this, because we'll want to watch and see what happens in the next even 3 or so years, how these ministries have been able to perform, especially being leaving the country in terms of development, equitable distribution of resources. The government development agenda should actually be felt everywhere across the board. And that's the single most challenge that the president has. As opposed to politics, I think it is whatever cabinet first that comes out. As I said before, it's a launching pad for the deputy president. He doesn't care whether these people will perform or what, but politically, if they're able to bring leverage to his side, then I think he might be having a good team from the likes of Babu Namwamba, people from Hassan Omar, and if he really wants them to work with him, they work up to 2022, then he must get them in that cabinet.
And of course, the opposition has made it very clear that they will not recognize not only Uhuru's presidency, but even the cabinet and the government that he forms thereafter. But the president has been very categorical that uniting the nation is top on his agenda. Are we likely to see the executive pull a surprising move and perhaps include in the cabinet or within the cabinet individuals who are known to be opposition-leaning?
I think he did that before. Remember the previous cabinet, I think 3 or 4 cabinet ministers were actually poached from the opposition side. Kaiseri, the likes of Kaiseri. He really had to bring people from the opposition then to blend and to make his cabinet. And that's, people really questioned and said that, I mean, the opposition then had people who could actually run government and just didn't have the opportunity to run government. I think if he repeats this for himself, it will be very dangerous for 2022, because this is you know, it's Uhuru's Kenyatta legacy and time, and then also it's a succession politics within the Jubilee that who comes in after Uhuru. Then if you bring in people who will outsmart the people who you work with, because they are coming from the opposition, you are giving the likes of the people in the opposition a political mileage or an advantage against yourself. But I think it's important for the president to have a uniting factor, whether it's through dialogue or what. But it doesn't necessarily, the way Karua has said, it doesn't necessarily mean that you must work within or with government within government. Although I also look at sentiments that are being double-speak, because how will you then not, how will you support and work with President Uhuru, for example, and not accept to take a position in his government, whether it's advisory, whether it's just like cabinet position, whether it's a diplomatic position.
Right.
So I think and then she can't work in the county government the way she's saying, yet we know very well she's lost a case, and she might not be able even to revive
she
it.
might sit out for the next 5 years.
Yeah. So I think what needs to happen is that she has to either ask herself whether she's going back to politics proper and get alignment with the opposition and place her politics with. Actually, she's indirectly saying that she's going back to the opposition by saying, I will support the government, but
not from inside.
Not from inside. But how? She's not explaining to people how. But it's also kind of looking at how politicians are very they care so much about themselves.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
It is a conversation we'll be continuing in a different time because, of course, the different parliamentary committees also need to be formed. A lot of wrangles within the opposition in terms of representation. But there is Ivan Sofula, who is a political commentator, and it brings us to a break here on KTN News Center. We are discussing the looming cabinet shake-up after Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in just 2 days ago. What is in the in tray for the cabinet? Will there be a phase of national inclusion? That is a conversation we're having this morning. We'll take a short break on KTN News Center. Stay with us. More news making headlines coming up in just a moment.